NASCAR keeps adding chicanes, so we'll see if they throw another one in there for us over
You get
the
a
next
chicane,
week.
and you get a chicane.
Yes, NASCAR is the Oprah of chicanes. Welcome to Going In Tight.
Coming out loose.
Yeah, buddy. We did it, boys.
Welcome back, everybody, to Going In Tight, Coming Out Loose. We've got a lot to talk about today, starting out with the New Hampshire race that we had last weekend. Overall, it was a pretty solid race. There were quite a few battles going on throughout the race in different positions in the top 10. So it was fun to see that. However, there were times where it got pretty spaced out. We saw some people doing pretty well throughout the race that might not be expected. Bart, what did you think of the race that we had this weekend?
If I was to sum it up, I'd say it was pretty good. It was really good racing, but there was also periods of nothing. There was such good racing with the battle with Hamlin and Harvick and Brad. I mean, that was awesome. Even the drivers were commenting, this is awesome. They were having a good time. That was awesome. But then there was just a lot of nothing. For a short race, there was spaced out 2 to 3 seconds or more.
Yeah.
Just not really anything happened. But I would say, to sum it up, for the most part, it included a lot of things that were super exciting. I would have to say, first of all, what the heck is going on with Kyle Busch? I mean, not even to the competition caution. He just barrels into the wall.
Yeah, and obviously, he didn't just take a right turn into the wall. He blew a tire, but still, I mean, the issues just persist with this guy. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And if you don't follow us on Twitter or on Instagram, you need to go out there and do that, because Bart comes up with the funniest crap during the races. But it really is like he's sitting in a room that's on fire, and you said it perfectly. 6 months is a trend, and he's trending downward, and it's getting worse and worse every race. And then he has that bright spot where he'll win a stage. But like we said last week, he fell outside the top 10 when he finished the race. So he's really struggling, and it's becoming more apparent that there's not even going to be a shot at the championship this year, because he's putting himself so far back in the playoff points that he's going to start out with. So I definitely think there's some issues. We've said before, it could be the practice and the lack of practice being there, the lack of qualifying. The team's just not able to prep as well. But his teammates are doing really well. You've got Denny Hamlin, who's doing really well. You've got Truex, who is performing well, and then you've got Eric Jones, who over the last 4 to 5 weeks has come on and gotten a couple top 10s and kind of put himself in a position where he can vie for the playoffs. So I don't know what's going on with him. It really seems like he is just on a downhill trend.
Yeah, quietly consistent is what I'd call Eric Jones. He got 24th in this race, so he didn't do as well as his teammates Hamlin and Truex. But with Busch, I'd say it was more so the lack of practice for him. I don't know that it was the tires' fault. I think it was the way he was driving on those tires. You saw Christopher Bell have issues with tires, and you also saw Matt Kenseth. He really had some trouble, man. He just called it the third time. He was like, we're going to call this.
Listening to that radio was crazy, because he had the tire go down. There was some type of rub, and then he goes in, they switch the right side tires, goes back out, immediately comes back in. It's not only a little bit embarrassing, but the crew chief comes over and says, don't switch those right side tires till you figure out where the rub's coming from. And the next picture they show is him driving the thing off the track. He was just through with it. With that racing team, the Matt Kenseth experience is failing a little bit.
You know, he has to hate coming back a little bit. I think that confidence of, I am a Hall of Famer, I can go back and pick this up like riding a bike. And he came to a different team, a different setup, a different manufacturer. Everything's different. The setup is different. He's just not used to it. And he's not able to go out there and practice and get used to what he likes and what he doesn't like, and get used to the team. So I think it's just a disaster for him. And I know he's got to be regretting it a little bit because we're going to remember this. We're not going to remember the good times. It's always the bad times that towards the end that you're going to remember. It's just like Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah.
You tend to forget that the guy's won 7 championships when he hasn't won a race in 3 years. It's kind of the same thing. You hate to tarnish the reputation, and I feel bad for him. I know he's better than that. He's kind of got the deck stacked against him a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned Jimmy Johnson. We did see a little bit better racing from Jimmy Johnson.
12th.
Yeah, 12th. He could have had a top 10 finish, but something on that last long run, it's like his car just fell off right at the end. But maybe somebody in his camp is listening to the podcast and saying these two guys want you to do well. And he finally came on. He had an okay car, but he put it in the top 10 consistently throughout the race. That's more of the Jimmy Johnson that everybody's used to. You don't have to have a perfect car, a perfect setup, but you can make lemonade when you've only got lemons. And that's what he did there. So was there anybody else that you were surprised by having a good day, or anybody else that we saw up there that you liked?
Well, the battle at the end for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, that was about the most exciting thing going at the end. There wasn't much excitement. Brad pretty much dominated the race and won. But we saw Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick, William Byron, and Jimmy Johnson all battling for position right there, and that was pretty fun to watch. So all in all, Johnson, proud that he got it in the top 15. Same for Byron. He needs to perform right now if he wants to stay in the playoffs, so good for him. Reddick, I mean, he's really impressing me being a rookie, and I really see a lot of promise in his future in the Cup. And then Custer is showing that it wasn't just random luck that he won Kentucky. He is backing it up. He's really getting the hang of this, and he's doing well. Matty D, I'm telling you, Matty D is really showing consistency when he's not caught in some accidents or just bad luck. Matty D could win a race this year, if not next year. I promise you that will be number 100 for the Wood Brothers, and it will come in the next year. I promise you that will happen. And then Logano, somebody who started the year off so well, has just fallen off, along with Kyle Busch. Practice just is ruining his day each week, and this is his local track. Historically not consistent there, but he did. I believe he got 4th.
Yeah, I agree. And then Mr. Consistency, Almirola, with another top 10. He is now on a roll of, this was his 9th top 10 in a row. So he's got quite the consistent run going here and stacking up points. He keeps starting on the pole with the so random draw that we have going here that NASCAR is doing. So he's had luck go his way with starting position, and then it seems like he's been able to put together a good car. The interesting thing that they said is they tried to set his car up like Harvick's and have him learn how to drive a car that was set up like Harvick's during that race. That was interesting to me because it gave us a little bit of that dynamic of what a racing team is going through. And this year they said they really tried to tailor the car to Almirola, to his driving style. And so far it looks like it's paying off for those guys. So really, really consistent with him, a guy that not only consistent on the track, but consistent in your fantasy lineup as well.
Yeah, I believe he has the longest streak for top 10s right now, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty impressive, given that he has not won any this year, but come pretty close. And then Brad, now the storylines are just heating up out there in the media world with Hamlin and Harvick obviously dominating this year. The only closest person they have is Brad. So he's won 3 races, and he is doing pretty well. But in my opinion, and this is my prediction, is that he will fall off and he will not be a top contender in the Cup championship. And that is because he's done this routinely. It could be his year. It's a good year for Ford, and Penske is definitely up there and dominating the season. But he's won 3 races each year for the past 3 years. And he does it somewhat earlier in the season, and then that's it. So I could be wrong, but that is my prediction.
I don't want to say that he's not going to show up in the playoffs, even though it's something that's happened before, just because of the unique situation. It's not something where he can practice, get in his head and overthink things. Denny Hamlin has said it's been nice not overthinking things. He's, taking more of the technical driving, being able to focus on his things. I think Brad will do well, but like you said, with Harvick and Denny, he is so far off not only their win totals, but it just seems like they're at a level that's above anybody else. But I do have to say, I think Brad starts that second tier of solid drivers, and you get like a Brad, you got Truex in there who are just getting in the top 10 and being consistent the whole time. So I'm not willing to say he can't make it to the championship 4 yet, but history could repeat itself here.
Just a prediction. True or false? Who's excited? It's another episode of True False. We bring it back to be consistent every week at this point. You love it. We love it. Chris absolutely loves it. So let's play another game of True False. Are you ready, Chris?
Yep.
All right. The theme of this True False, 10 questions, True or False. We are asking Chris different things that have happened this year. Are they true? Are they false? Let's see if he remembers. This has been the longest year known to man for everyone. So, so let's get started. Number one, there are currently 2 drivers tied for most stage wins this year.
True.
Correct. It is true. Brad K and Chase Elliott are tied with 5.
Nice.
Oddly enough, all the Brads are in stage 2. He's only wins stage 2. That's the thing that he has.
Yeah, maybe his team is able to adjust on the fly better than some of the others. Who knows?
All right, number 2, Joey Logano has won a race after March of this year. True or false?
False.
That's correct, yeah. False. He has not won a race after the pandemic began. So winless is Joey Logano at this point after we have come back from the pandemic. Is that funny to you?
Yeah, it was. Winless is Joey Logano after the pandemic.
My wife is going to be shaking her fist when she hears this, talking smack about Joey. Number 3, Blaney got second this year in the Daytona 500. True or false?
True.
That's true. Yeah, he was. It just like you got mixed up in the end of that and just like the massacre of Newman's wreck. And I forgot that he was up there in the front, got second.
Yeah. I'm doing pretty well so far. It turns out my short-term memory isn't too bad.
Yeah, there's that arrogance. Let's see if that All right, number 4, Talladega was the first track to allow fans back this year after the COVID-19 pandemic.
That's true.
False. Miami.
Oh, no. And so it begins. I just deteriorate into my own lack of humility.
Miami allowed, I believe, 1,000 service members.
Yeah.
I
remember
to attend. That. Yeah. Talladega was the first one to allow like the general public. But I believe there was like limitations. Like you had to live so far from the track and
Yeah, there was a ton of stuff around it. I mean, I think NASCAR's done a pretty good job of monitoring who comes to these races. I certainly know firsthand that they've done a hell of a job keeping people out. So it's I think they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, Bob Pockrass was doing an analysis on his he was posting on Twitter. He was actually reaching out to health departments in these areas that they held races in and allowed fans, and there was not any signs of increases that correlated with them having the race there or having fans in attendance. So typical Bob looking out.
Devil's in details there. Good Lord.
Yeah, he's going deep. He always does. I mean, I appreciated it. So
okay, so that was number 4. So I'm 3-1 right now.
Correct. All right, number 5. Jimmy Johnson got a top 10 this year at Auto Club Speedway.
False.
True.
Did he really?
Jimmy Johnson got 7th place at Auto Club Speedway this year.
Sorry, Jimmy.
Yeah.
That's bad being a Jimmy fan and not knowing that. I know that they did the cool thing where his daughters waved the green flag. So
yeah, and they
was pretty cool.
He was at the front of the 4 or the 5 car salute, whatever they do.
Yeah, that was really cool.
You should be holding on to that 7th place finish right now, just holding on to it. So
Yeah, I've been, you know, we hadn't started this at that point. All I've been doing is talking crap about him because I'm so upset week after week.
all right, moving on. You're really gonna like this one. Number 6, Quinn Huff is currently
Hey boy.
is currently 19 years old. True or false?
False.
It is false. He's 22 years old.
Yeah. He's old enough to know better.
He is.
We couldn't leave him out. We left it last episode. We felt bad not talking about you, Quinn. If you're
2020 is the year of the Hoff, so we had to throw him in there.
Year of the Hoff. Yes.
All right, number 7, Martin Truex Jr. has only had 1 win this year.
True.
Yeah, one win.
The short track.
All right, moving on. Number 8,
All right.
Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has a stage win this year. True or false?
True.
Yeah, he does. All right, number 9, Eric Jones has more top 10s and top 5s this year than Jimmy Johnson.
True.
That's true. Eric Jones, he gets a hard time from a lot of people because greatness,
Including us.
Yeah, a level of greatness is expected out of him because of where he's at, and he is held to a standard that is much higher than what he is performing at, in my mind. So, yeah, I mean, he is doing decent, but we should see some wins out of him, and we should see better consistency.
I agree.
He's running a lot of mid-pack races, and he has quietly gotten the top 10. I mean, the quietest driver.
Yeah, I mean, quit talking shit about him because he's going to start winning, and I need Johnson to get up there, so I don't need you working your reverse magic on NASCAR anymore.
All right, and last question. Here we go. Bubba Wallace' best finish was at Las Vegas this year. True or false? It's true. He finished 6th place at Las Vegas this year. You started out so good.
I did start out very strong and stutter stepped there a little bit at the end. So if anybody doesn't know, I'm a pretty I have this false confidence for some reason. Bart is the more humble of us, and it was brought to light in a major way when I beat him for the first time in 2 years in fantasy. and lo and behold, an hour later, NASCAR comes out and says that they are moving everybody's best garage driver up into their lineup, which propelled Bart 2 points in front of me for that week, and I did not get my win after giving him a mouthful for losing to me for the first time in 2 years. So that is where my false sense of pride comes in.
All right. Well, that has been another episode of True False. We look forward to next week. See if we can stump Chris once again. True or false? All right, everybody. We're moving on to the main topic this week. We want to talk about sponsorship. There's a lot going on, and we want to talk about it. So it is said that 60 to 80% of a team's revenue is earned by sponsorship dollars, which is crazy to think about. We went through the whole dollar amount when we talked about the lower tier team. There isn't a lot of money you can earn when you're just doing subpar, probably even well in NASCAR to run a team and get by with dollars left over. It's a very expensive, low margin business. You have to be very passionate about this and very good to succeed. There's many different aspects of what can bring you marketing dollars and who's willing to invest with you. And they're looking at all different things to get somewhat return on their investment by sponsoring your car. So we just looked at a few teams just to see what kind of money these teams are making, what kind of money they're bringing in, and what sort of sponsorship dollars that we can kind of deduce that they're probably earning. So we looked at Hendrick. Hendrick Motorsports is said to be one of the most profitable teams in NASCAR right now. So they were estimated to make $180 million gross revenue in 2017. That is crazy.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but it actually went down into this year. It's estimated to be 172. So that could be a variety of reasons. I know that they've had trouble with the sponsorship for Bowman's car. the general marketability of NASCAR and investing in that from a company standpoint isn't as wise as it once was. So we looked at how much money a company is actually making a good team, and it's generally $50 to $200 million estimated a year. But how much of that are they actually taking home? So we looked again at Hendrick Motorsports, and only $7 million that they brought in. I mean, $7 million is a lot after you paid all the teams and made all your investments and built all the cars and ran the whole season. But if you're looking at the margin, it's really not that good.
No.
But that's just what it takes to
Shark
run
Tank and investing in that.
Like, nah, I'm going to need proof of concept, NASCAR. So it's really interesting to take a look at how much money it takes for a very large team to run and do well. So we also took a look at what a mid-tier team would look like.
Yeah, and a mid-tier team to us is somebody like Richard Petty Motorsports, who Bubba Wallace is driving their car. Obviously, there's lots of different opportunities that have come about for their car since we have come back from the pandemic with all of these social issues going on. However, they're estimated to earn $20 million this year in revenue and only bring home $3 million in profit. So it shows the difference there. I mean, that's only $4 million less than Hendrick.
That's a better margin.
That is a wildly better margin than if you're spending or if you're bringing in 172 in revenue and only taking a $7 million profit. So it's wildly different, and it begs the question we were asking earlier, is it more beneficial for these lower tier teams to just not be a part of it? Is there any benefit of them being a part of NASCAR? And when you look at a mid-tier team that can bring home a significantly higher profit margin with a significantly lower level of success by maintaining sponsorships, it begs the question, is there an advantage to having 4 cars? Would it be better we talked about last week, the possibility of Hendrick, and even though we don't want to see it, moving down to 3 cars, would their profit margin drastically increase by getting rid of a car that's only got a manufacturer sponsorship? And is there something you see, Bart, that goes more into it than just, hey, some sales guy that works at Hendrick Motorsports went to Exalta and re-upped their contract for, the next 3 seasons to be the primary sponsor for 95% of the races? Is there something behind it with the drivers that you see that they need to bring to the table? What is it?
Yeah, I think these companies are looking for there's a dollar amount I'm sure that they're willing to spend, but if they're going to go all out and go after these drivers that are up there in the top 5 consistently, or for Denny Hamlin or Kevin Harvick this year, they have to look at a variety of things. They want media coverage. That's the whole point of this. They want to be highlighted on TV. They want to be highlighted in the news. They want to have different things that they can do, like people wearing Napa shirts everywhere, or drinking Busch beer because they like Kevin Harvick, so they're loyal to that beer. But there's also the driver's personality can have a lot to do with this. The greatest example that I have is Napa. So Napa was the sponsor of Michael Waltrip from 2001 until 2013. Prior to 2001, Michael Waltrip held a record for the longest losing streak active in the Cup. He won the Daytona 500 in 2001, and he won, I believe, a total of 4 races his whole Cup career. I believe that's right. And his last race that he won was in like 2003. So
he
Napa
carried
stayed
a sponsor for 10 years without
a very good sponsor at that.
Right.
And they stayed loyal to him because Michael Waltrip was just not a race car driver. There's a reason why he's in the booth now at Fox, is because he's a personality. The dude is quirky and funny and knows a lot about NASCAR and always finds himself being in the news or being interviewed because he will say what's on his mind, and he will just say it in a very more colorful way than most.
Yeah.
And so for Napa, that was a great investment for them because they were always being highlighted with Michael wherever he was and whatever he was doing. it's not only the fact that you have to be a very good race car driver that has the potential of a lot of media coverage. You have to have a good personality. Anybody that's super negative and not following the rules or not being ethical or is known for being a Debbie Downer or doing things they shouldn't and acting in a professional manner, that's not a great candidate for a sponsorship. So
Unless you're M&M's.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, unless you're M&M's or Snickers or M&M's hazelnut spread, and you want to slap a bumper sticker on Kyle Busch's ass, then it makes perfectly good sense because he complains enough to get himself in the news.
I will say that he does a great job of highlighting his sponsors. He has the nickname the Candy Man. When he's not selling energy drinks that probably suck, he's selling candy.
Oh my God, man. Rowdy energy puts me to sleep.
To go on, there's besides the fact that you're a character, there's other things that these potential sponsors have to look at, and that's the potential. So getting in early when a driver isn't going to cost as much or a team isn't going to charge as much for a sponsorship of a driver because they're just not there yet. So I think the best example of that would be Kyle Larson and Target. There was a lot of hype and hoopla around how he would succeed in the Cup. And so there was a lot of sponsorship opportunities for him and remained with him through the entire time he was there. I wouldn't say that he necessarily took off to the best of his ability. And I think his best days in NASCAR are probably in front of him. But he was a very big name to want to go after because of the potential that he held when he first started in the Cup.
Yeah, and while he was in Cup, he still carried some pretty big names on his car. So, I think he's going to have a tougher time when he gets back having a corporate sponsor want to slap their name on his car. But I definitely think that there's so many opportunities out there for sponsorships. And like you said, you see now Napa's with Chase Elliott, who is an up-and-coming guy. His dad has a ton of history in the sport. You've got a lot of people with a lot of personality, and I think that's where we're going to see if Bubba Wallace does stay with Richard Petty, I'd be interested to see the numbers compared to this year because he's going to pull a lot more sponsorship, which when you have more revenue coming in, you can put more money towards your car. And I think that's where that discrepancy comes in. So you've got Bubba Wallace and Richard Petty Motorsports who are projected to make $20 million and bring home $3 million in profit. They're not putting nearly as much money into that car, and that's where the margin can be increased. Or if you still need to make money, and these guys it is a business, so they're not in it just to win races. They're in it to make money. These guys are made of money, the guys that own these teams. So they're running a business. Then you go to a Hendrick Motorsports, a massive portion of that $172 million in revenue, I imagine, is going into putting brand new engines in the cars, into not reusing parts on a week-to-week basis, into making sure that the fabrication is up to a level that is well above a mid-tier team. So I think that's where, in my head, the distinction comes into place.
Bubba Wallace is in a very interesting position because Bubba Wallace is not a bad driver. Bubba Wallace is a very good driver, and I think I'd be interested to see how he'd do in a better equipment. But in the situation that he's in, he's performing well, and he's in the media a lot because of good things that he's doing for the sport. And he is creating more marketability out of him and driving up the sponsorship opportunities and how much money they could potentially make. So if he decides to stay with Richard Petty Motorsports, he could potentially be bringing in much more money than they're used to, which in turn they can invest more in the car, and in turn he can have a better chance of succeeding with his talent that he already has. On the opposite end of that, you can easily lose your ride because you cannot find sponsorship.
Right.
We've seen drivers in top tier equipment who are very good and have proved themselves at a lower level lose their ride, like Daniel Suarez did last year, because he didn't really have the sponsorship opportunities that a lot of other drivers did. But there's also a big example of that, and that is Matt Kenseth, whose name I cannot say, and somehow I bring him up all the time. He was sponsored by Dollar General in 2016, and he was a championship contender. He lost that sponsorship, which is likely what led to JGR deciding to let him go the following year in 2017. So it's interesting how somebody can be so good and be a driver that you would definitely want on your team, but if the marketing dollars aren't coming in alongside you, then you're not a great investment for that team. So it kind of made sense that they did away with him and brought on the new young Eric Jones with a lot of potential, who in turn brought in some new sponsorship.
Yeah, and another thing that I think has something to do with it is there has been, and it is well documented, a decline in NASCAR, and it's left these companies trying to find better ways to make use of their money. You've got Home Depot, who pulled out of NASCAR. You got Lowe's, who sponsored Jimmy Johnson from the time he went full time with Hendrick until year before last when Ally came onto his car. You've got these cars, or you've got these sponsors who start looking to make acquisitions. They're still very profitable companies, but they're pulling out of NASCAR and finding other streams of advertising and finding other ways to reach new demographics of people. I don't know that there's a very measurable way to look at a return on investment in NASCAR. The thing that surprises me is the data that they actually have. So one of the things that I know that NASCAR passes out to sponsors is the amount at the end of the season. They look at the amount of time a certain car is on camera. They look at the amount of time a certain driver is on camera, or a certain team is highlighted on camera during a broadcast. They look at the amount of exposure. And this is probably why M&M's just eats Kyle Busch alive, no pun intended, is he is on camera an exponentially larger amount of time, whether it be because he's wrapped up in something like running Chase Elliott into the wall, or whether he's winning across the three major series of NASCAR. He is on camera all the time, and he is in an M&M's fire suit or a hazelnut spread fire suit, something associated with their brand. So there are a lot of analytics that go into it, but I don't know, other than doing pulse surveys, that you could look at the NASCAR audience and say, oh, well, we ran the Skittles car at Daytona. Do you really go after Daytona and see like 120% increase in the amount of Skittles that people buy? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it does seem like it's much, much harder to track the return on investment. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, it's weird. This is something that I see, in my opinion, is that it's impossible to track the return on investment in this scenario. I don't believe that you can really get a firm number on the impact that you truly receive from sponsoring a car. That's just my opinion. I've never sponsored a car, nor
right. Maybe we need to get our logo slapped on one of these cars. They say it's only like $200,000 to get it on the headrest.
Okay.
You got that right?
Yeah, probably. From all speaking of sponsorships, anybody's interested in sponsoring this podcast, we have a few spots available.
Absolutely.
But to me, I think there's two things that I see very marketable about marketing within or sponsoring within NASCAR. And that's one, NASCAR audience is your demographic. So whatever you're selling is selling to the people who like NASCAR. It's your audience. Why not have a billboard within your audience that these people see? They're constantly around. They wear shirts, hats. That makes them more loyal because they like that driver and they like that brand. It makes perfect sense. Or if you're a very large company who spends a lot of money on marketing and is willing to shell out money to try and get more exposure, so that would be like an insurance company like Geico or Nationwide. They spend a ton of money on marketing every year. Why not? What's surprising to me is that you see these big companies on lower performing cars. Kroger, for one, Love's, Oscar Mayer.
Yeah.
I mean, those drivers do okay, but they're not up there getting media exposure all the time. And those are very large companies. So I think to a degree, they've limited the amount that they're willing to invest. So I guess that's why. But what about these lower tier teams? Like, you couldn't even, like, I've seen Quinn Huff's car tons of times now from that wreck and just general curiosity of where he's at just because of the hoopla around him this season.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you what the heck his sponsor is right now or what it is.
No,
So
I
is it a
couldn't
good
either.
investment for these lower tier teams to invest in these teams that are in the back?
I think what NASCAR does really well is present so many different levels of sponsorship. To me, it's like a newspaper. You can either go and run an article or an advertisement in the New York Times, or you could go to Buffalo, New York, and run an ad in Buffalo. And the price is going to be wildly different because of the amount of reach that they have. So I think it's the affordability of somebody like an Oscar Mayer who might be able to sponsor a Ryan Newman who can run his car in the top 20 and will get some media exposure. I'm sure they're not paying nearly as much as Ally Financial is to run a full-time sponsorship on the 7-time champion's car who is in his retirement season and is going to be getting a ton of media exposure. I'm sure they are paying exponentially more for a sponsorship on the 48 than Oscar Mayer is on the 6, I think. But I think the key here in our conversation isn't just is it profitable for the sponsor, but the teams need it in order to be viable and be competitive. And I think that there are some things that NASCAR can do. I think that there are some very, very different pieces to the puzzle, like you discussed with the personalities and giving people media exposure, like you discussed with the top contenders. You see the top contenders with consistent sponsorships. Busch Beer is always on Kevin Harvick's car. FedEx is always on Denny Hamlin's car. It might be FedEx Express one day, but it's FedEx sponsoring the car. So there's a ton of different things that get taken into play. Is there anything that you think NASCAR can do to make sure that they're giving these drivers the opportunity to, and these teams the opportunity to get more sponsorships in the sport? Because ultimately, if there's no sponsors, then the amount of drivers decrease. If the amount of drivers continue to decrease, they certainly can't have a 40-car field, but it's going to start to shrink the sport even more and more and more and more. So what could NASCAR do to try and help remedy this issue?
Yeah, I'd hate to see more things like Levine Family Racing shut down this week or sold their charter to someone else. So I hate to see that happen. And that likely has to do with the amount of income they're earning through sponsorship dollars. So we said what the drivers could do, right? They can be a very good driver, and which is easier said than done, and be a top contender, be a personality that gets media exposure, that is an ambassador for their sponsor, and really takes ownership of being sponsored by them and really wants to see them capitalize on being that sponsor. But there is at the same time something that NASCAR can do. And you've seen them take the sport, Steve Phelps here recently, and really try to make it better from all angles. And they're trying different things and they're trying to be innovative. But one thing that you've seen, and I like this, but it has changed the sport a little bit, but the Cup has been historically sponsored by a brand. Cigarettes forever. I don't know what year that started, but that was all the way up until the turn of the decade. So then you had cell phone companies and energy drinks. It has always been sponsored by by a brand, by a product. And that is no longer, which I like it. I like it just being called NASCAR Cup. But they have the 4 main sponsors now: Coke, Monster, Geico, and Xfinity.
Right.
The Xfinity series is still called Xfinity fastest internet. The cars are the fastest Xfinity internet. I hate when they say that. And then you have Gander Mountain trucks, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Gander Outdoors.
Yeah. So you've still got some level of sponsorship there. There's still, there's tiered sponsorships. And like you said, there's tons of ways you can sponsor within NASCAR, not only cars, but the sport itself. And at tracks, there's tons of way to market yourself, no matter the number of dollars or investment you can make. But I think there's a couple things, this is my opinion, that NASCAR can do to make this better for the sponsors. This used to happen. If you watch old races, you see the commentators on the networks highlight the car, highlight the sponsor. That always happened whenever they took off. They've started doing it again in the NBC SN recently, where they let the drivers introduce themselves in the order that they're starting. But it'll just be like Kurt Busch, Las Vegas, Nevada, and that's it. But he's not saying who the car he's sponsored by, the number. I think that would be cool. Where if they were going down the line, it would be Kurt Busch, number 1, Monster Energy Chevrolet. I think that would be really cool for them to do, and that would be given extra incentive for those top contenders, those top sponsorships, to get highlighted a little at the first of the program. I think that would be great for them to do. I know that networks are really weird about letting them sponsor because they're not directly earning those dollars.
Right.
So they don't like that. But I think that's necessary because in turn they are sponsoring the sport, which makes the sport go round, pun intended. Another thing is I did like the paint scheme change that they did at the All-Star race.
Yeah, I really like that.
I thought that looked better. I thought you could clearly see the sponsor. The number looked good. It's clunky right now. It's a little clunky. And it is really hard to see the sponsor. A lot of times when it's a car you're not familiar with or a car that changes sponsors from time to time, you're not really familiar with what it is. You can't see what it is. You have no idea, nor do you care. And you see it once and that's it. So no big deal. But I think they should change the paint scheme. I think that would work better. And this is the big one. And nobody's ever said this to my knowledge, but it's a big deal to me and I need to say it. NASCAR apparel sucks. It is the ugliest clothing that you'll ever see. This is truth. You can buy NASCAR apparel just to cut off the sleeves and go to a white trash bash. There is no other purpose for most of NASCAR apparel. It is very ugly. It's decaled to the max. They can make cool NASCAR clothing. They can make cool any other sport clothing. But for whatever reason,
feelings.
But yeah, fanatics, get your shit together.
My main concern as we close things out is when we see somebody like the 88 who was traditionally sponsored by Nationwide. You saw Dale Jr. when he drove in that car had Nationwide as a premier sponsor. Nationwide pulled out of that, and since then Alex Bowman has been driving a Chevy Parts or a Chevy Goods car most of the time. You're finding less and less drivers that have a solid main sponsor like Denny has with FedEx. It's not as often as we're seeing that. And I think we need to find a way where we can make that happen again, because that's when we saw, consistency. We saw people who wanted to be a Tony Stewart fan because you knew he was in the Home Depot car every week. And now you go to a race with Chase Elliott, and if you go in the Hooters t-shirt, he could be driving the Mountain Dew car, or he could be driving the Napa car or the Little Caesars car. While it's great that he's bringing in a ton of sponsors, there's not a level of consistency within NASCAR anymore that I think a lot of the fans who tout that the 90s were the best part of NASCAR and we need to get back to banging doors and wrecking and all that kind of stuff. I think there was an assimilation with a single sponsor or brand that they found, and that brand was linked, like you said, to a personality, to somebody who was pivotal in the sport. So I think all of those things that you mentioned, not only switching up the apparel, but switching up the paint scheme, even like you said at the beginning, starting out the race where people could say their sponsor, and if Kyle Busch ends up wrecking out before the competition caution, he gets a chance where his sponsor says, oh, okay, well, at least I was there and I had some screen time. So I think there are things that we can do. I just don't want to see it continue to decrease to where, we've got like a Daniel Suarez running a Haas car for Stuart Haas, or Alex Bowman running a Chevy Parts car for Hendrick Motorsports. I don't think that's going to move things forward or make other sponsors want to jump into the sport. All right, everybody. After a race weekend that was a little light, we are back with a full slate and a cup doubleheader this weekend. We've got the Gander Outdoor Truck Series racing at Michigan International on Friday evening. Then on Saturday, we've got Xfinity at Road America, and we have a cup race that evening. And then Sunday, we move into the ARCA race in the early afternoon and the second race in the doubleheader for the Cup Series at Michigan. So, Bart, we've got back-to-back 400s at a 2-mile track. What do you think we're going to be seeing this weekend from these races at Michigan?
Hopefully something better than what we've seen out of Michigan in the past couple of years. I'm hopeful. I think they're going to run the mile high spoiler on it like they have for any super speedway you would technically say this was, since it's 2 miles in length. I don't know. I hope that it's exciting. I think we'll see definitely some desperation out of these drivers here on the bubble. We've got Amarella, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Clint Boyer, William Byron, and Matt DiBenedetto all in right now. But there's a few drivers on the outside looking in, and they're all relatively close. Tyler Reddick, Jimmy Johnson, Eric Jones. What do you expect to see?
Yeah, I think it'll be good racing. I'm hoping it doesn't get too spaced out and dredges on. What we've seen with these 400-mile races plus this season is everybody being very, very conservative up until the last 60 to 100 laps, and then the race starts to become competitive. We start seeing battles for position. I hope it's not that, but I think it's going to be competitive because the playoff bubble is about to freaking burst for somebody. We saw the fact that Jimmy Johnson fell back, got that 12th place finish behind Tyler Reddick and behind William Byron. That put him a little bit far, even though it was a good finish compared to what he's done over the past few weeks. It still put him a little bit farther outside that playoff bubble. So everybody's going to be fighting for points that is around this playoff bubble, namely, like you said, Reddick, Johnson, Byron, Matty D, and Clint Boyer. I think the other guys are pretty well locked in, but there's going to be a lot of people fighting for stage points. I think it's going to be a huge strategy race like we've talked about at these 1.5 2 mile tracks. It's really looking at what strategy are they going to use to overcome the people who are in front of them. So I am excited about it. I'm excited to see how it shapes the playoff picture. But when it comes to looking at our fantasy lineups, who are some guys that you have as top picks and going into this race?
This is Ford country, so Fords will dominate. So I expect to see a lot of Ford drivers, namely Penske, do very well here. So if you're looking at your NASCAR app or on the FanDuel or DraftKings, you're going to want to put Harvick, Keselowski, and Logano in your lineup. And also some Toyota drivers. You're going to look at Hamlin, you're going to look at Kyle Busch, and then one Chevy driver, Kurt Busch. So those are my top picks for fantasy. So anybody that's looking at do a little side gambling or a little fun on the NASCAR app, those are your top picks. If you have used all of them, I know that I have used all of Truex so far. I think I have a handful of everyone else, one or two of some. You're going to want to look at Truex, Elliott, Almirola, Bowman, DiBenedetto. I expect all of them to do pretty well, probably top 10. And if you're absolutely desperate, these are the folks that you're going to want to go after: Boyer, Byron, Reddick, Johnson, Jones, Byron. So basically all those folks on the bubble, you're going to want to put some hope into them that they can get it together when it matters most and put together a decent finish. If you're super desperate, and I'm talking, you have used all those drivers somehow, there are two drivers that you can get super desperate on, and those two are Austin Dillon and Ryan Preece. Those drivers have shown that they can be in the top 10 in the last 4 races that we've had in Michigan. So those are my top picks. Anybody else you like there?
Yeah, I laughed at you because you had used up Martin Truex, but I have used him up as well, which is really disappointing. Yeah, it's one of those things that my confidence got the best of me again, but he has had just an outstanding showing at some of these recent tracks. He's the past 2 races there, he's gotten a top 5, and I think that those Joe Gibbs cars are ones who will benefit, and we saw them benefit from these back-to-back races. So I think the Sunday race is going to be the most interesting out of all of them, because you're going to see people dialing in these cars over that Saturday race, and people who might be in the top 16, we could see them vying for more of a top 10 finish. But I actually don't have Logano in my 5. I've got him in my garage, even though it's Ford country, and I know that Michigan is super proud of that, and Ford always tries to do well there. But I've got him in my garage because at the tracks 1.5 miles and over, he's only gotten 3 or 4 top 10s and 1 top 5 this year. So he's done a lot better at the shorter tracks and the tracks that are less than 1.5 miles. So I don't as much trust what he's going to do on the 2-mile track this year, and I think that's a result of practice. But yeah, my top guys are Harvick, Elliott, Kyle and Kurt Busch, and Keselowski there. So I think Elliott's going to show up. I think he was showing so well at the race last week, and then seemed like he kind of fell off there at the end in that last stage. So I'm hoping that he can put something together, and he's gotten inside the top 10 a few times here. So those are the guys that I'm looking at as well. Pretty similar, but you always throw a curveball at me in the fantasy lineup and come out a few points ahead. So I'll be interested to see who you actually put in there.
Yeah, while I'm supplying my top picks, these are not my picks. So these are my guidance on who performs the best, and you'll never know who I'm picking. That's between me and God.
yeah. He's probably cutting deals with you daily.
But I am excited for a full weekend of racing. Doubleheaders are always exciting, something that we don't typically see. And I honestly, quite honestly, I'm most excited about Road America. I really like that racetrack. I think it gives a lot of different exciting things that we see in a road course, like we would see at Watkins Glen, my favorite. But we won't be seeing that this year. So hopefully Road America can take the place this year.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a fun race to watch. And speaking of Road America, keep an eye out for the number 21 car, Kaz Gralla. He is going to be joining us on our next episode. So definitely root for him in the RCR Chevy that he will be driving next week. And we look forward to talking to Kaz after that race and seeing all that goes into not only preparing for that race, but what it's like driving for RCR in the Xfinity Series. So we're looking forward to that race, and we're looking forward to that interview with him. And then it'll be interesting to see the ARCA race on Sunday before the Cup race too. It's always fun to see those cars race on the same track, and just how different the setup is when you knock it down like 3 levels. So there's a lot of people doing well there. Ty Gibbs has shown up and done a really good job in the ARCA series. He came in a couple races in. He's got a couple wins under his belt. And then Haley Deegan as well has really shown in her first year in the ARCA series that she's going to be a contender as long as she can stay there. But that'll be a fun race to watch. And then and then we'll be moving on to Daytona Road Course the next week. So that'll be interesting. That's our replacement for Watkins Glen, and NASCAR keeps adding chicanes. So we'll see if they throw another one in there for us over
you get
the
a
next
chicane,
week.
And you get a chicane.
Yes, NASCAR is the Oprah of chicanes. So we will see how that goes next week. Well, that's all we have for you today, folks. We thank you for tuning in to Going In Tight, Coming Out Loose. Like we said, stay tuned for next week. We're going to have Kaz Gralla on the podcast after his race at Road America. As always, you can find us on any major podcasting platform, Spotify, Apple, Google. You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at goingintight_pod, or you can find our articles and our episodes on goingintightpodcast.com. We look forward to talking to you all next week. Have a good one.